Welcome back to Learn With Me, Ms. Killen here at MPB. We are in Unit 11 still, statistics with two variables. Today we're looking at Lesson 2. We're looking at conditional relative frequencies, relationships between two categorical variables. We're looking at the use and calculation of this frequency and to determine if any association between the two variables. So let's just jump in and see what we've got. So it says when we find those percentages of the joint frequencies compared to the overall total, this is our conditional relative frequencies. To determine if, so what happens when we're determining? It says there is a relationship between the two categorical variables. Look at the conditional relative frequencies. If the conditional relative frequencies differ considerably, it suggests there's an association or a relationship between these two variables. So let's look at a problem to see what we're talking about, this relative frequency. So here we go. It says, Miss Anna and Mrs. Lisa, first 4-period classes were surveyed about their preferences for a class reward for those who achieved perfect attendance. Students were given the option to choose a movie night, a picnic, or a surprise event. A random sample of 100 from both teachers' classes were selected. The counselor created a frequency table to analyze the responses. So we have both teachers' classes, we have movie amounts, picnic amounts, and the surprise amounts, and then we have our totals in our margins. So let's go ahead and look at these questions it asks us. What percent of Miss Anna's students prefer a movie night as their class reward? So Miss Anna's movie is right here. So we're going to take that 22 and we're going to look at the total that would be of Miss Anna's class. So we have that 22 out of 50. I plug that into my calculator and I get 0.44. Now I'm turning a decimal into a percentage by moving my decimal 2 places to the right. So I'm going to have 44% there. So now let's look at number 2. Which reward option was the most popular among Miss Lisa's students and what percent of her class chose it? All right, so let's see Miss Lisa. So let's get a different color so we can see Miss Lisa. So Miss Lisa said what was the most popular. So I have 18, 20, and 12. Obviously, it's the picnic. So then it says what percent. So I've got my 20 out of 50. So I put that into my calculator, and I am going to get 20 divided by 50. So everybody put that in your calculator. 20 divided by 50, and we get 0.4. I'm going to turn this into a percent like it asked by moving it 2 places, putting my 0 as my placeholder. So here I have 40%. Now let's look at the blue question. It says, what is the combined percent of students from both teachers who prefer either a picnic or a surprise event? So we're looking at the picnic. Let's get a different color. Let's go for blue. We're looking at the picnic of both and the surprise for both. So when we add these, I get 60 out of the whole 100 students. Well, 60 divided by 100 is going to give me 0.60, which I move 2 places, and I get 60%. Good job. Now here's the last one. What is the difference in percentages between Miss Anna's and Miss Lisa's students who chose the picnic option? So let's go ahead and look at this one. So I'm going to do some erasing so we have a clear understanding of which numbers we are looking at. So then it says chose the picnic option. So we're looking here. So I've got my 15 out of 50, and I've got my 20 out of 50. That's how many out of each class wanted the picnic. So 15 out of 50's percentage is 30. That's a calculator skill. And 20 out of 50's percentage, we put that 20 divided by 50 if we do not remember. We have to move our decimal 2 places to the right, and I get 40%. So when it says what's the difference, that means I'm doing a subtraction. So 40 minus 30, my difference is 10%. Good job. You want to make sure that when we have these questions about these tables, that we're reading the table and we're going back to what it's speaking of. Looking at the different marginal numbers, looking at the different frequencies of the joint teacher versus the topic that they can choose. You want to make sure that you're understanding how you're reading these tables to get these percentages. All right, so let's try the next one. It says, time for you to master. Hattiesburg High School counselor took a survey of 120 students, 60 football players and 60 tennis players, to find out their favorite type of reading material. The three options they were able to choose from were fiction, anime, and graphic novels. The results are shown in the table. So here's the table of our reading preferences of the athletes. We've got football players and what they chose, fiction, anime, graphic, tennis players, fiction, anime, graphic, and then we have our totals. So number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4 are going to reference back to this table. So you and your table partner, go ahead, pause the video, look at this table, answer the 4 questions, and then come back to me and we'll see what we got. Okay, so my reading preferences among these athletes. So let's go ahead and dive into this first question. It says, among the football players, what was the most preferred type of reading? Well, I go to my football players, and my most preferred is going to be my fiction. So I'm going to put fiction here. The next one says, what percent of tennis players preferred anime? So now I'm going to have to look at this whole line of tennis players. So my anime was 15 out of how many? 60. So when I have 15 out of 60, I plug that into my calculator and make that decimal a percentage. I am going to get 25%. All right, number 3 says, compare the preferences for fiction between football and tennis. Which team shows a stronger preference and how much? So I'm going to erase these so I can look to see what we've got. So it's wanting what? The fiction, so this one right here, of both, and which team shows a stronger preference? Well, obviously, my tennis shows a stronger preference because I have 30 out of 55, and football was 25 out of 55. So, obviously, tennis preferred the fiction. And then it says which team shows, and we compared, and so we did that. By how much? It's by, let's see, we have 5 more in tennis, so 5 out of 55. I'm going to plug that into my calculator like we've done. 5 divided by 55. I am going to turn that decimal into a percentage, and it is going to be by 9%. Last one. If a student is randomly selected from the group of athletes, what is the probability that they are a football player who prefers anime? So I've got a football player who prefers anime. So 20 out of all of these people, so let's get a different color so we can see. So I've got this 20 out of 120. I'm going to plug that into my calculator. So I've got 20 divided by 120. I get my decimal, move 2 places to the right, and I get 16.7%. Well, Ms. Killen, I didn't get the 0.7. No, you didn't. You got 0.1666 and on and on and on and on. So when I move over, I have 16.6 continuing, so I'm going to round up that 0.6 and have it at 16.7%. So that's a good question, making sure we're understanding how we are rounding and why we are rounding. All right? It says we want to remember what conditional relative frequencies are and how we use them. We also don't want to forget about our joint frequencies when we're joining 2 different things together and what that amount would be, and how to find percentages. We divide and then move our decimal. I am so glad that you've come to learn here with me at MPB. I am Ms. Killen, and as always, have a great day.